So what happens if I have this friends at my party and more people start showing up and I want to keep adding one for every person that shows up to my party? I could do something like this. So first of all, notice that we're using let here instead of const. If I said const here, it's going to say, hey, you already had friends at your party. You can't assign that to be something else. So if you know that friends at your party is going to change down the road, you say let. Oops. Some of you might ask, why don't I just always use less and then I never have to worry about these errors? And there are people that do that. So that is a valid thing to say. But I do not. I like const. There's a thing called the principle of least power, that you use the most simple thing possible. So const does not have the power to change. Therefore, if I look way down in the code and I see friends at your party again, I know that that is not changing because I knew it was constant before. So there's an assumption I get to make about code that I wrote. And I think that's a really good thing, personally. And there are people that would disagree with me, and I disagree with them. So screw you guys, I'm the one teaching. So this one does have to change, so that's why I say let, right? So let friends at your party equals 0, and then I say friends at your party is reassigned friends at your party plus 1, right? So whatever friends at your party was before is now assigned whatever it was plus 1. And I can do that. I can reference friends at your party when I'm reassigning friends at your party because this gets run first, and then it gets assigned this. Does that make sense? So I can reference it here because here, at this particular moment, it's going to be 0 because that's what it is. So it's going to be 0 plus 1, and then this is going to be the answer of 1, and it's going to be reassigned here. So this is now 1, then 2, then 3, so on and so forth. You get down to the bottom, and you have 10. Make sense? So it'd be nice if there was a better way to do this, that I didn't have to copy and paste this, every time that I wanted to add someone to my party. There is, luckily. Talked about let and const. Something that you will see that this is old JavaScript, you will see var, V-A-R. We're not going to talk about it today because it is old and you really shouldn't be using var. I'm going to say ever. I don't think you should ever use var. I know Kyle Simpson would disagree with me. And again, he's in Texas. I am here. So I get to say what I want. var is the old way of doing it. I don't think it's good anymore. You should use let. There are some differences there, and they're not worth discussing. If you'd like to look at it, there's good blog posts on it. Just Google it. So we're going to do what's called a loop. Now, a loop allows us to execute something multiple times. So the first one that we're going to learn here is called a while loop, which is really, really similar to an if statement. So I'm going to say let friends at your party equals 0. So I'm going to say while friends at your party is less than 10. So as long as this statement is true, it's going to keep doing whatever it's doing. So here I'm going to say friends at your party equals friends at your party plus 1, right? As long as that's true, then it's going to keep adding something. Eventually, this is going to get bigger than 10, right? Eventually, this is going to become false. And then it's going to console.log. It's going to break out of that, and it's going to keep going, right? So it's actually going to run this statement here on line 3, the one between the curly braces, 10 times, and then it's going to break out of it. It's actually going to run it 11 times, technically. And then it's going to log it out here, which is why you're able to see 10 here. That makes sense? So while this is true, do this. Now what happens if I made this like 15? It doesn't even ever get run because it's going to ask this first, like, hey, while friends at your party is less than 10, well, 15 is never less than 10, so it's just going to not ever run it. Now if I get down here and say negative 100, this is going to get run 110 times until it's less than 10, and then it finishes and it's done, right? Make sense? So this is a while loop. I will say that you do use while loops. I don't think I use them, I wouldn't say maybe daily, but maybe weekly. So they are useful to know. We're going to get down and we're going to see another kind of loop, and I use for loops every day. but I teach you this one first because it looks really similar to an if statement, right? And it functions relatively similar to an if statement. There's another one, we're not going to talk about it today, but there's another one called the do loop. It's really similar to a while loop. It works almost the same. The only difference between a do loop and a while loop is a do loop is going to happen at least once. A do loop will guarantee is like, I'm going to run the body at least once, and then I'm going to ask the while question. Whereas while loops just ask it. I never see do loops, but just know that they exist. Any questions about while loops before we move on? If you put a bad thing in here, I'm not going to do it right now because it's going to crash my browser if I do it. But let's say I'm just going to while friends at your party is greater than 10. So if I did this, and I made this equal to 10, if I uncommented this line and then commented the line underneath it out, what would happen? You're going to get what's called an infinite loop, because this is never, ever going to be false. It's because it's just going to keep adding. So, because while 10 is 11 greater than 10? Yep. Is 12? Is 13? Is 14? Is 15? And it's just going to keep going forever and ever until eventually it's going to crash. It's going to crash the browser. This is called an infinite loop. They're very easy to do. It will crash your program, and that's fine. We all do it. But actually, this is, I would have to make this 11 anyway. Or the infamous while true loop, right? This is just going to keep running forever and ever and ever. So be aware that there's a thing called an infinite loop. It's really easy to do. I don't want to crash my browser right now because I'm teaching you things, but that's what it would do. Questions about that? If you ever see like your browser like lock up, it's probably an infinite loop. That's the most common reason that like if I wrote code that, I guess I could just do it in here. It wouldn't be very hard. So or while true console.log I, and then here I said let I equal 0. It's good to see how what it looks like when it crashes. Okay, so I save this. This is going to be an infinite loop, right? I'm going to come over here and just, you can see that it's like really locking up my browser. Like it's really unresponsive right now. You can see I'm beach balling. At some point it's going to say, hey, I think something's wrong. Eventually, Firefox will just kill the tab. Right, but this is like not responding. I can't scroll. I can't do anything. I'm just going to close the tab. Okay, this is not what I wanted to do. I have made a mistake. Anyway, if this happens to you, you probably got an infinite loop. Yeah, this is right gone. Okay, so please close. Oh, there we go. Thank God. Any questions while Firefox puts its shit together? Yeah.
We have a question from the chat room. What is the difference between var and let?
I will give you the one sentence answer to that question because I don't want to get into it. It's a lengthy explanation, and the difference is scope. It's the way that they handle scope. Let has block level scope, and var has function level scope. If you are unsatisfied with that answer, then I would invite you to Google it. Something I did want to show you is just a little bit, there's these things that are called unary operators, which is not something you need to know, but I'm just going to throw it out there. Unary is in contrast to binary, right? Binary has two options, or two things, and unary has one. So I have this first line right here, friends equals friends at your party plus 1, right? Plus would be what's called a binary operator because it requires one on this side and one on this side. Whereas here, you only need one thing. Again, it's not really that useful of a distinction to know, it's just FYI. So these 4 lines of code right here, 2 through 5, do exactly the same thing. This adds 1 to friends at your party. This adds 1 to friends at your party. This adds 1 to your friend at your party, and so does this. So you can see down here, when I console.log that, it's 4. Now you might ask, why is there so many ways to add 1 to something? I think part of it's just legacy. Like JavaScript is based on the language C. C is a language from the 70s, and C has all these features, and JavaScript just kind of adopted them. And most languages that are C-based, like Java and Go, and a lot of these have a lot of legacy that comes from C, and so that's why. So plus equals right here, it's going to add 1 back into this. And so for example, I could put 5 here, and it would add 5, right? So it's just going to add whatever this number is to this total. And I think down here, I don't show it, but there is also subtract equals. So that would subtract 5, multiply equals, divide equals. By the way, that's the way you do divide in JavaScript is slash. And there is even, I'm going to make this 2, star star. I think that should work. Oh, it's 1, so. Star star is exponent. So if I have like, well, I don't need to do it up here. Console.log 5 star star 2, that is 5 squared, just so you know. 5 times 5, or cubed 5 times 5, or yeah, 5 times 5 times 5. So that's what star star is. Anyway, let's go back to plus equals 1. Just wanted you to see that pattern because it does get used. Plus plus, this is one that you'll see a lot in conjunction with for loops. It just means increment it by 1. There's also, as you might imagine, minus minus, which is subtract 1. There is no multiply multiply. It's just plus plus and minus minus. So that's why if you've ever heard of the language C++, it's C incremented by 1, right? That's kind of the joke. Anyway, it wasn't funny then, it's not funny now. And then you can put the plus plus on the front, and you can put the plus plus on the back. There is a minor difference between the two. It is not important. The difference is when it gets incremented, which in these two cases, because it's the only thing on the line, it doesn't actually matter. In JavaScript, you will always see people put it on the end. I don't think I've ever seen anyone put it on the front. I would even venture to say most JavaScript developers don't know you can put it on the front. But if you're writing C, I guess in C best practices it's on the front, which I didn't. I'm not a C developer, so don't believe me, but that's what I've heard. Okay, any questions about incrementing things? Make sense? Okay. The reason why I show you this is you don't really see plus plus a ton. Did I use plus plus when I did my code thing? Where's my code? I did, right there. It's one of those things that like it's so automatic that I just forget to explain it. So sorry. Now hopefully I've explained it so you get it. So going down here, friends of your party equals 0. We're going to talk about this kind of loop right here, which is called a for loop. Okay? Obviously named after the for right here. So you're going to have 3 parts to a for loop. Okay? The first part is you declare what's called your control variable. For whatever reason, since the beginning of time, the control variable for a for loop has always been I. I don't know what it stands for. I don't think it actually stands for anything, but it is always I. You can put other things there. There's no reason it wouldn't work. It's just that everyone calls it I. So you will always see that called I. If I have a for loop within a for loop, then they just start going up the alphabet. So the next one will be J, the next one will be K, the next one will be L, M, N. If you're going past N, you have serious problems. Honestly, if you're going past maybe K, you're going to have some really big problems. Anyway, so this is always called I. It needs to be let, right? Because if it's const can't change. It's going to say you can't change const. So it's going to be let I equals 0. The second part is the condition, that, like the while loop, is like as long as I is less than or equal to 10. Right? So as long as this is true, it's going to keep doing it. As soon as this is false, it breaks out of the loop. And the last thing here is what do I do at the end of every loop, right? So when it gets down here to the bottom, it's going to run whatever is here. So here I'm going to run I++. I'm going to increment I to 1, or 1. Right? I'm going to increment I by 1. That's what I'm trying to say. Now you absolutely could say, let's just break this. So I could totally make this 0. I can make this part 10. And as long as I is greater than or equal, oh shit, I broke it. This is exactly what I was trying to avoid doing. Because every time it runs my code as soon as I type it, now I'm stuck in an infinite loop. And it's going to say, hey, your web page is slowing down. What would you like to do? Stop it. Thank you. Refresh the page. That's exactly what I was trying to avoid doing, and I did it. And now everything's back to Fira code again. Whatever. We're just going to deal with this being Fira code for the moment, and during the next break, I will fix it. So, just so you know, this little character right here, the less than or equal to, is 2 separate characters. It's less than and equal, but when I put them together, my code or my font combines them into one thing. This is called a ligature. If you want to do that for your own code, there's a thing called Fira code. There's also Operator, which is what everyone swears by. You have to pay $200 to use Operator. It's a stupid font for $200. Don't buy it. It's dumb. Anyway, Fira code is free, and it's from Firefox. Or Mozilla, rather. Anyway, that's what's happening there. What I was trying to demonstrate to you, let's just do this like this. For let I equals 10, I is less than or greater than or equal to 0, I minus minus. So you can have it go the other way too, right? So now I can do this and not break everything. And this works exactly the same way, because now it's rather than counting up to 10, it's counting down to 0. And if I wanted to make that even bigger, I could start from a greater number, and it would count down from even more, even more, even more, even more, even more. Right? Make sense? Now, why would I use this over a while loop? In this particular case, a while loop actually would probably work a little bit better. But the reason why this for loops end up being really useful is this I variable ends up being useful because on every loop it's a different number, and so sometimes that's useful. That's kind of abstract for me to say right now, but we'll see examples of that, of where that I variable becomes very useful to use, particularly with arrays, which we will get to in a little bit.